8 races, 4 different winners, and a Red Bull that doesn't look as dominant as it used to be. The RB20 has some inherent problems, as Max likes to state it. Problems the 22, 23, and now currently their 2024 car seems to have. With Ferrari making massive upgrades in Imola and McLaren making a big jump in Miami, both teams are very competitive now with the Red Bull, and we have big competition between the 3 teams. But does this mean that Red Bull is now behind? And how is Ferrari and McLaren's strength Red Bull's weakness? If you guys are new here, I'd love it if you subscribe. It would mean the world to me. We're killing it in the support, and thank you so much for being here for me. But let's get started in talking about the top 3 teams and Red Bull's inherent problem. Red Bull's probably had their worst streak in these new regulations when it comes to these 3 races. With that being said, it was a P2, a P1, and a P6 finish, so it isn't really that bad. They weren't able to find the setup in Miami, Imola also cost them, and same thing now with Monaco. The one thing that is a common for this Red Bull car and why it seems to be struggling on these specific tracks, and especially the street ones, is because of curbs and bumps. The Red Bull car has always pretty much been the car with the lowest ride height. That's why it's been so fast in the high speed corners and on normal traditional tracks like your Barcelona for say. Red Bull has been always strong, Spa also being one of those tracks where they seem like the most dominant car there is. The RB20 has improved a lot upon the weakness the RB19 had, which was slow speed corners. Ride height definitely contributes to this. They probably had a bit of a lower ride height on the RB19. Maybe the RB20 is now somewhere in between the 18 and the 19 to be able to help with slow speed cornering, but also be super fast in the high speed. We gotta remember that this team not too long ago was winning by 30 seconds, but now has depleted with upgrades coming in the season. Monaco and Imola are the tracks that exposed this weakness. We saw that specifically with how Max had to ride the curbs, them not being able to find a proper setup for Max, and having to deal with understeer. Checo has definitely been a ways away from the car, and Max has been the defining factor in these races. Imola shouldn't have been a race that Red Bull won, but Max was the deciding factor there. With that being said, this Red Bull car is still the strongest. Monaco is always that one outlier. We can always see teams jump up here that we did not see jump in the beginning of the season. It's also a specialist track for Charles if you give him the right material. A 2021 pole position, 22, and now 24. This guy definitely loves himself a Monaco GP. The Red Bull car's race pace is still very phenomenal, and even with the curb problem, they can still ride those curbs much better than other teams. But this is where Ferrari and McLaren strive, being able to benefit that from a certain setup choice that they have made, with their beginning base car being at a ride height that they find comfortable on tracks with curbs. Red Bull prefers to run a stiffer suspension on their RB20 car. It helps them a lot with high-speed corners, and the stiffer the suspension, the better the car will lay in a lower ride height, which is what the RB20, 19, and 18 has been able to run, a low ride height without any bouncing. But this makes for a very bumpy ride when going over curbs or any of those bumps, specifically in Monaco and Imola. That's why we got Max talking about it being like a kangaroo and the car pretty much breaking his back, with him being in pain by the end of these Grand Prix. Ferrari even has the opposite suspension to that of Red Bull, and we thought that would be a weakness coming into the season, considering McLaren has the exact same suspension as Red Bull. But Ferrari has definitely silenced the haters when it comes to that suspension choice, with them having a push in the front and a pull in the back, the opposite being on the Red Bull and the McLaren, with a pull in the front and a push in the back. They've been able to build a car that's strong in the high speed corners, now strong in the low speed after these updates we saw in Imola, and an all-around really solid car at riding curbs and giving Leclerc exactly what he wants, that bite in the front. I think that's been a huge thing. Carlos Sainz definitely started this season a little bit better than Leclerc, but as these updates have came and he's became more adaptable to the car, Leclerc has had the edge over Carlos. Watching the onboards in both Imola and Monaco, I can definitely see that this car is a bit of a more oversteery one with a stronger front end, which is what Leclerc prefers and Carlos isn't really the biggest fan of. With that being said, both are very adaptable. Both can drive with a bit of understeer, oversteer, a balanced car. These guys are both incredible talents in our sport, and in my opinion, this is the best driver lineup on the grid. This car has been able to produce results with those updates being able to help out in the low speed corners. That was something that SF23 was dominant in. In that 2023 season, low speed and 90-degree corners was where the Ferrari car really had its strength. But now, at the start of the 2024 season before the Imola updates, it was really strong in high speed corners and much more improved on its tire degradation, which is something they've been able to keep with the updates, but also improve its slow speed cornering just like they had in 2023. This car is becoming the perfect hybrid that they've always wanted. And with Leclerc finding the perfect setup, it's just a dream combination for Ferrari as of currently. With the next track being Canada, it's very hard to say that Red Bull could be the dominant force here. It's definitely going to be strong again, and there might only be a select few tracks where Red Bull can really have an edge over the two teams. McLaren, just like the Ferrari, has been strong in the high speed corners. With the new update coming, they reduced plenty of drag. They've already been able to ride those curbs really well, and now with a strong car in the straights, but also high speed and low speed, with it having a much better balance in the car, McLaren is definitely a contender. Putting together Oscar Piastri's lap in Monaco, if we took the first Q3 lap and the second Q3 lap, if we combine those sectors together, he actually had the faster lap over Leclerc. Now that's obviously looking at it in an ideal way. If we were to look at it in an ideal way, Leclerc also had more time to find. He made a mistake in Sector 1, made up for it in Sector 3, but the Ferrari's traction in Sector 3 was phenomenal, while McLaren in Sector 1, with a bit of those medium speed corners, was super strong, and in Sector 2, the braking part was also another McLaren success. These cars in Monaco also have full downforce, so it's hard to read anything when going into this. We're never going to have a track where these cars put on that much downforce and are that reliant on just pure mechanical and aerodynamic grip. On most tracks, you're going to have to make some type of sacrifice, whether that be in the aero or the mechanical, in stiffness or softness for the suspension, so the car can have the proper balance, but it might lose out a little bit of time. This is where the Red Bull finds its biggest success. With a very stiff suspension, we've seen Max talk about the car being a kangaroo, jumping up and down, and a comparison of how they take these curbs shows you that the Red Bull was not able to take them the same way that the Ferrari and the McLaren were able to. This was the same thing in Imola through Sector 2 as well, and this could be the same problem in Sector 3 and a bit of Sector 1 for Red Bull in the Canada GP. Because there are big curbs where they have to be very careful, while Ferrari and McLaren can take more of that. Max has also stated that the simulator has not been helping with this inherent problem. In this sim, it actually says they ride these curbs really well, but then on track, this doesn't translate. First time hearing this from Red Bull, considering we've only heard it from Mercedes and Aston Martin, who have been very adamant that the wind tunnel has not been performing as well as it should have on track performance. With them losing their big guy, Adrian Newey, there definitely is some pressure on the team, but with that being said, this is far from over from being still Red Bull being the first top team. It's much closer. I can definitely say that Ferrari and McLaren on certain tracks will beat them. I do think Canada is going to be another one of those close ones. Barcelona, depending on the tire wear, could be another close track as well, because Red Bull doesn't have that tire advantage that it used to have. It's another weakness that they've inherited with the RB20, with the cost of being much better in the slow speed corners. But what are your thoughts altogether with the top three teams? Do you guys think it's going to be a very competitive season? I truly believe so. I thought in the beginning of the year, when we saw that 30-second gap, that was too exaggerated. There was much more from these cars to perform. We still haven't seen the full extent of these Ferrari updates. We should see that in Canada, and teams are bringing plenty more updates here in the Canada GP to try and catch up, specifically Mercedes, who has been performing a bit better in the latest Grand Prix. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please leave a like, subscribe, it would mean the world, and peace.